On the 4th day of December, Second Dinner gave to me 4 minor buffs, 3 massive changes, and 2 of them are nerfs, but 1 massive OTA for Marvel Snap. Let's talk about it right now. I legitimately didn't believe that Second Dinner would be willing to make this change to Human Torch, taking him from a 3-3 to a 3-2. Now, at one point, by the way, he was just a 1-2, but now he's gotten actually nerfed all the way down to the 3-2 stat line, which is a pretty big deal. And Second Dinner acknowledges that, going immediately into saying that this is a pretty large nerf. And it's difficult trying to balance Human Torch and a move deck in general, because you don't, as a new player, typically see how much you can really scale with this guy. And you can scale very massively, as we've been able to see after it was changed to a 3-3 stat line. It was swapped with Vulture, right? Vulture was a 3 cost, and then Human Torch was a 1 cost. They swapped their stat lines around. They said part of the reason was because they didn't want the deck to be so reliant on Destroy not being a real deck, which makes sense because they really don't want to guess as much rock, paper, scissors matchups directly inside of the game, but they buffed this card to a 3-3. At one point, it was thought to be a rework. I'm just going to say it was a buff at that point, as it really made it a bit difficult to interact with. You didn't have a consistent way to be able to Shadow King, and also the decks are running Cosmo, and we got more movement cards inside of the game, and it's just been a lot, y'all. And this is a good change. I think it's one that I also just didn't expect, because it felt like this was a deck that we only really saw a lot of inside of the top of Infinite. Outside of Infinite, I didn't really see a lot of this movement style of deck, Human Torch deck, really being run. I didn't see it as much of a problem there, so I didn't think that this was going to be a card that they would hit, but I kind of love the fact that they did, and it's just a good change. It's going to be a 3-2 instead of that, which means it's going to scale the way the old one did, but I don't know. I like it. They even talk about how they potentially were trying to think of going to a 4-cost 3-power or a 4-4 to make it just more difficult to move Human Torch, but they weren't sufficient they weren't like certain if it would be sufficient enough. Anyway, I like the fact that they did this change. It's gonna be difficult, and they've said they're gonna keep monitoring the movement archetype, and I'm glad about that. I think that Vulture is a card that's really getting cut now as it's gotten worse, and I wonder if and I hope they're gonna take a look at it, but I like it, and hopefully what Second Dinner is also talking about is that they want the movement style of deck to have a variety of payoffs, a variety of ways you can win, and especially with Spider-Punk being the last month's Season Pass card, really wants to give another way that you can try to build that stuff up. So I am here for it. I do like it. I'm uncertain how this is going to affect, the top of Infinite, right? It is going to mean that this is going to be, in the end, like a much smaller number, right? People were talking about capping it per turn or whatever, and I really, for its worth, I think that it completely killed the card, and I would hate that legitimately. But I do like the fact that they are putting a single point of power taken away from this is then 2 points of power taken away once it moves. Then it's 4 points. Then it's 8. Then it's 16. And it increases by a lot. So I do think this is going to be an impactful change. Whether or not it's going to be enough to kill the deck, I hope not. And I'm someone who, I'll get bored of decks, I'll get annoyed of decks, and I'll say that I don't want to see them around anymore. But legitimately, Second Dinner's done a really good job of making it so that even if a deck gets nerfed, it's still playable. And so hopefully this means that the movement deck is still playable, right? Without Human Torch. So I think this is going to be good. I know that a lot of people who are more pro, more better, whatever you want to say, more betterer, I don't know, I'm not speaking English, at the game are really stoked about this change, and they've been overmoved for a hot second. So I think this will be good for the metagame. I think hopefully that the newer player, when they look at Human Torch, they don't think of it as a absolute just loss of a card. I'm hoping that people can see it and still be interested in the style of deck. That's going to be a different thing, and we're going to have to wait and see exactly how that goes. But I do hope that, people are still going to play Human Torch, just like also not in the top Infinite, just people in general will play it. And that's what I'm most wondering with this change, is are people still going to play Human Torch? Because it does become a lot less appealing. But I do believe that people who are still very good at the game, very good at these movement decks, are still going to be able to run it pretty effectively. Recently on stream, I was talking about the Storm War Machine Legion deck, and I was saying how I didn't get why Legion wasn't being nerfed, and then chat proposed to me, War Machine's actually more of a problem. It's very easy just to be able to use War Machine and set up everything completely. I didn't immediately agree with that, but Second Dinner seems to have taken that approach, and I think it's actually a really good one. War Machine is going from a 4-6 stat line to a 5-9. No changes in the abilities, but I really love this change in general. They're saying that the Storm, War Machine, Legion deck, that trifecta, has been good for a while now. It's been running around apparently for a couple of months, and they want to just bring it down a little bit. They want to make it a little bit worse. So we'll see what exactly happens with that. But I also want to note something else Second Dinner does mention inside of the notes here, where they say, and I quote, "We might revisit War Machine alongside a rework to Storm. We've long felt that such a popular character shouldn't be promoting such a frustrating play pattern, similar to Spider-Man in the past." Now, if you don't remember what Spider-Man did in the past, he actually just placed a web on your opponent's side of the board and said, "You can't play cards here anymore." For next turn, at least. And that was it. And they're saying that with Storm, and that's a really interesting one, and I don't know if I hate it, legitimately. I think that Storm being a different type of card is potentially cool. I do want her to go back to a 3-2. It doesn't really make sense for her to be a 3-1, especially if you're going to put War Machine to a 5-9. But I love the fact they're potentially going to rework Storm, which is already a cool thing. They're trying to remove those more frustrating cards in Marvel Snap, which also, like, if they're doing that, does that mean, like, maybe Professor X, maybe Jean Grey might get some changes? Or is it just like the Storm War Machine because it's very specifically this combo? One thing I'll note, which I actually really love, is this is a great card for Electro now. And Electro keeps getting more and more buffs as they make these 4-cost tech, quote-unquote, cards worse, but then they're giving Electro, like, more value, because now I can go with a turn 3 Electro, turn 4 Enchantress, which I couldn't have done a couple of months ago. I can do turn 3 Electro, turn 4 War Machine, which again, I couldn't have done a month ago. And I'm really interested if this is another cool way to play Electro. And I don't think that's what you're gonna look at this OTA and take away from. You're not gonna be like, "Oh, sick, an Electro buff." Like, I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, cool. They're trying to hit Storm. They're trying to put Storm, War Machine, Legion decks into the grave. I'm down. But I really want to see if this is going to be a new place potentially where they can mess with the Storm, or they can mess with, like, Electro War Machine. I want to do more with that deck. I want to do more Electro things because I think Electro is a really cool deck, a really cool card now that he's gotten that extra few points of power. It's taken him a time. Remember, he was a 3-2 at one point, and now War Machine's enabled him. And it's now you don't have to lose anything on rate. It's a 5-9, which is, if you're looking at Abomination, that's just average stats for the cost. I don't know. I actually really love this change, and I'm super stoked for what War Machine Electro type of decks look like in the coming weeks, months, years, 2026. Morgan Le Fay is not a card I would have expected to see get a buff, a rework, a change. But they're changing her to a 3-4. And I'm a bit uncertain on this one, purely because Airwalker into Morgan Le Fay was such a great line. And now I can't do that anymore. That's legitimately, that's the biggest thing about this change that I'm uncertain about. However, I still think this is an awesome change, and I love for more Morgan decks. I think I'd be down to try to see, you know, can you try to squeeze it into, like, a cheaper deck? Right now that it's a 3-cost, is it going to be easier to slide in with other cards on potentially turn 5, right? On turn 5, I can use an Electro, destroy 3 1 costs, and play Morgan Le Fay on the same turn, not losing anything, honestly. And it's still a 4-power card, which, right, the average cost is still like a 5, I think, nowadays. But, I mean, this is still a better ability than Cyclops base, right? Like, I'm down. I think this is really cool, and especially during a season where we're doing a lot of destroying and a lot of discarding, this is a lot of fun, speaking of a lot. And I hope that there's gonna be something interesting you can try to do here with it's a 3-cost, or if a card goes to 3-cost, immediately want to try it. I don't know if this was bugged for a bit, and I don't know if it still is, but if you brought back a Sebastian Shaw with Morgan Le Fay, it actually he doesn't get his additional +2 from his ability. If that's fixed, then I'm really interested in trying to do some discard, like discard surfer shenanigans or whatever. I like it. I'm really stoked about this change. I think that a lot of these types of cards that are trying to say, hey, do this cool thing, and then you get this cool payoff, right? Destroy a bunch of cards, and then you can play them again with Mortal Fey. That's a really cool thing to try to do. It's just been difficult to do in the past. A lot of these quests, right? And I think that that's been something that they're trying to balance for a little bit, right? I think in the previous OTA, maybe the one before, they buffed up Zombie Galacti, giving an extra point of power, and that made a difference. They want these quest style of cards to be at least interesting, to be impactful. And as a hint toward later, they even say that similar to this card, they're also going to be looking at some of the other, I think they call puzzle, payoff, deck building, tricky cards, like Spider-Man Noir. So I'm stoked. We're not going to talk about Noir yet. We'll get there in a moment. But let's talk about some other 3 costs that are going to get a little bit of love. Elsa Bloodstone was, I think, one of the very few cards that was so problematic during her launch season that she got nerfed within it. No other reason other than the fact that this was just too good of a card. And she got nerfed to be from a +3 to a +2 for her ability. And they're not going to give her a +3. She's not going to get that busted. But she is going to a 3/5, which is a pretty good stat line. However, it obviously is requiring that you fill up your side of locations and then also hopefully can do more with that. And that's a bit of a difficult deck building ask to do. And they even mentioned in particular that they were potentially worried about this card in combination with the zombie season. Because the zombie season, the horde deck was going to be a little bit interesting, going to be a lot, and they weren't certain how it was going to go, but they made this change. They updated Elsa Bloodstone afterwards, as it's not really been a problematic deck, and they're fine with it. And if they need to do other changes, they will have to do them. But I think that Elsa Bloodstone is going to be a really cool card, really interesting thing you can try to mess with. So I do like this change. It's going to be a lot. I also just am kind of surprised that this is going to be like where the card exists. It's not, people will say like there's power creep or whatever, but legitimately, I think as time has gone on, we question, or we have a better understanding of how much power we want to be paying for effects. And a 3/4 with the potential to fill up a side of the board isn't really the most interesting, especially considering that when you do fill up your board, unless you're using Kitty Pryde or a mover card, typically you're locking yourself out of a location. And also you're super susceptible to Shadow Kings and Juggernauts. And it's a really difficult thing to try to figure out, like, okay, is this effect going to be worth it for the cost I'm playing? Or is it better just for me to say, cool, nice card. I'd rather just, put a Cosmo or a Shadow King or Tech card in there of my choice and just win the game instead with that. So I like this change. I think it's really cool, really interesting. And also with the addition of skills, it does feel like Elsa Bloodstone's getting worse. So it's a nice little bump to her. So I'm not going to complain about that in the slightest. I thought we've seen this movie before. I could have sworn that Swordmaster was a 3/7. Well, he was, and then they changed his ability to discard only an odd-costed card rather than a random card. And once that happened, he lost a little bit of power, but he's getting it back as odd-costed cards. Those are pretty difficult for you to actually want to discard in Marvel Snap. There are very few that are truly beneficial, other than the brand new card coming out next week, Weapon H. Weapon H with Swordmaster, that's a great combo, and it's built into the deck immediately. I'm not gonna believe if Second Dinner denies the fact that they want to say, hey, we want to benefit Weapon H with this. By the way, they even say that in the OTA notes. So this isn't even like a tinfoil hat theory, okay? I don't got a tinfoil hat on underneath the Santa one. It's just they want to be able to buff up a new card that's coming out and give you an interesting way to mess with it. I don't think it's going to move the needle on Swordmaster. It's going to make it probably okay with Weapon H. And is it just like Weapon H and I want to say Scorn? And that's it? Really? Or you can discard a 3-costed card and then use Firelord come back. AKA, y'all, this is the return of Cerebro 7. So I'm stoked about this change. Legitimately, I think it's gonna be fine. I think it's gonna be good. I love the fact that they are buffing cards in preparations for other ones coming out, because I don't think anyone was really gonna try to run Swordmaster with Weapon H. Maybe not, maybe people were. I didn't see that in terms of people who were talking about the combo, but it does mean that this is gonna immediately shine a light on this card, and as the light's shining on this one, Weapon H is stepping out, and so maybe it's be a pretty good duet. Or maybe not. We'll find out next week, but at least in the short term, I'm stoked about the Swordmaster change. This is one of those cards when people talk about, and again, I'm going to go back to the idea or the potential of power creep in Marvel Snap, and they're going to say, oh, they got to buff an old card now just because, no one's playing it. Was anyone playing Helicarrier? I don't think Helicarrier was ever really, in a true manner, being played in Marvel Snap. Even in the times where there was collector discard, you didn't use Helicarrier, you used Swarm and you used Apocalypse. This card has not been a playable card. So at the very minimum, you know, give it decent stats for when you just actually play it. That makes a lot of sense. I don't know if it actually matters though. I'm looking at this and I think, cool, it's got some extra power, but I don't know if I'm gonna play it. I'm not trying to play it typically. Maybe I'm trying to Ghost Rider it. And then I've discarded it, and then what? I'm gonna get all the cards, the same cards that were gonna clog up my hand that I didn't want in the first place. I don't know. I'm kind of not sold on this one, legitimately. There's some stuff, again, when you talk about the discard deck, I'm also kind of thinking about Zombie Power Man, one of the more recent cards that came into Marvel Snap. And I really like the idea of being able to mess with that with Weapon H. And last time I did that, I also used Helicarrier in my deck. So maybe there's a world where you can try to do stuff like that together, but it really doesn't seem the most interesting. I actually talked about this card on the Marvel Yap all the way back in June. And back then I said, I'd love it if it when the cards that it discards, if they're cheaper, just off by, like cheaper by 1, and that's it. And I feel like that's a more impactful change to this card, because legitimately I'm not playing this card, I'm using it for the ability. I am discarding it. And yes, of course, Ghost Rider exists. Even Hela exists, right? Maybe Hela is a legitimate idea with it, but I just am not sold on this change. I don't get why this is a card that really should get the extra power, right? Like, I get it needs the love. I just think this is probably one of the weirder ways personally to go, because I just don't think it matters. I've decided it's no coincidence that Second Dinner decided to buff a card I just put out a video with, and their new Season Pass card, right? That's just multiple reasons to play this brand new Dormammu at a 713. I'm gonna be honest, I actually didn't think he needed a change. I thought he was actually pretty, like, I didn't think Dormammu had any issues. I actually thought he was a pretty cool card. I've been enjoying it. I've been liking it, especially with Weapon X as an additional way to scale with the deck. Felt pretty good. I legitimately read this change and I was kind of shocked by it, considering how much fun I just had with Dormammu. But apparently he needed some sort of love, so I won't complain about this change. I do think that this is potentially inconsequential. It just kind of puts a little bit more of attention on him with the brand new cards that came out, similar to what I was talking about earlier with Swordmaster, where I don't know if the card is actually better, but, or at least meaningfully better, but at least there are more eyes on it now because there are going to be some more synergy cards that are also releasing this month. So cool. I'm stoked about this. I just don't know if I'm really interested in it. Actually, wait, now I'm wondering, can you run Dormammu with like Wild Child and fantomex? Because it does it say you need to have a card in your destroyed area? Probably not, right? You could still run Dormammu with those. Sorry, that's just me going, probably. Because then could you like destroy the card, merge it into Dormammu, and then only discard cards and be able to use fantomex/Wild Child? I want to say yes. Anyway, I like this change. Sorry, I got in a total tangent right there. Good change. I'm down for an extra point of power on Dormammu, as I just don't think it's a bad idea. Also, it's our first 13 power card in the game. At least base. All right, I teed it up. I said that Spider-Man Noir had the biggest change, and he really does. He's getting a complete rework here. He's gonna lose a couple points of power, right? He's going from a 4/6 to a 4/4. And his previous ability said, on reveal, if your other cards in play cost exactly 8 total, you know, add the top card of your deck here. He set its power to 8. And that was really difficult to do. The thing I found that was best to do with it was be like, okay, cool. You know, if I do have that power on the board, then I can do it. But it's not something where I'm running Domino into Shauna trying to force it every single game. It's just like, okay, cool. If it can happen, I'll be down. And then they're doing this change. And this is awesome. This is such a cool change and takes Spider-Man Noir from, I think, a garbage card to potentially one of the most exciting cards. And he is now going from his previous ability I already mentioned to the on reveal ability, set the top card of your deck's power to 8. If your other cards in play cost exactly 8 total, add it here. So just to make sure y'all understand this, No matter what the cost that you currently have on the board is, Spider-Man Noir will set the power of your top card of your deck to 8. However, if you have enough power on the board, or enough cost on the board, 8 exactly on the board, then not only is the card set to 8, then it's also added to the board for free. No matter either way, it still has 8 power, but in this other situation, it then also gets played for free. And this is so cool. And I love that they're doing this. Second Dinner actually talked about this a little bit more so, as they also mentioned earlier with Morgan Le Fay, where a lot of these quest cards are difficult to do. And they said they're going to take a good look into where deck building quests, they specifically are mentioning it as such, making them easier to achieve while still maintaining that these cards have exciting text boxes and payoffs. I also love the idea that this is going to be something better and something interesting, but I like the fact that you want to do something different than just with Jubilee, because if you can build towards it, it's cool. Or if you can't do it, then you're kind of okay with it. But even if it doesn't happen, even if you don't get this big payoff of, it getting played for free, you still get the benefit of your card now with a power of 8 instead. This is such a big deal, and it makes it really good for decks that I really wanted that I already liked it in, with like the Spice Rack small ball deck, where you just are using a bunch of cards that are really low power. You can do stuff now. It's not as hurtful if you Bast or Agent Venom this card. You're only losing a single point of power rather than 3, which is a big deal already. And then if you hit anything else, if it doesn't get played on the board, then you've just got an 8 power card that was most likely cheaper. I mean, a 6/8 Gore, 5/8 Iron Man, 3/8 Sage. I mean, this is so cool. I love this change. This is one that I didn't see a single person talk about. When Second Dinner was releasing this card, people were saying, wow, this card sucks. There's nothing good here. And everyone's like, all right, cool. What they're going to do to this card is they'll give it another point of power or 2, right? But no. What they did instead was super interesting and super cool, and made it so that Spider-Man Noir is potentially one of the most interesting, deck building puzzles out there. Y'all, I love this change. I think Second Dinner absolutely cooked with it. I'm so stoked for this. I'm stoked to be able to play with this card. And I also love the fact that they are going to be, figuring out how these questing cards should work. And they even say that this is a big learning moment for them to help them get a better understanding of what the ceiling and the floor of cards should be. So I love it. I love this change. I love the logic behind it. I love what it means for future cards and future changes. Honestly, they just knocked it out of the park with this. I'm so stoked about this OTA. And that's it. That's the end of the OTA. And it's only 8 cards, and I'm not gonna say this is the biggest OTA ever, right? Everyone always, like all the YouTubers always say, biggest OTA ever, or it's a massive OTA. And I'm still gonna say it's a massive OTA, be honest with y'all, because it really is, considering the last 2 were pretty middling. And this one just feels like they kind of just took it out of the park, right? That what I said at the beginning with the 4 minor buffs to some cards, sure. Then they also did a rework to a card that I wasn't expecting. They buffed up, they also buffed up another card that I also really liked, nerfed a card that made the game unfun, and nerfed a card that was just scaling to, it's such a solid OTA. I love it. I'm really stoked at this OTA, and it's really just legitimately putting a smile on my face when I read all these changes, and I've been able to talk about them with some other friends, and we're all like, yeah, this is awesome. When I say friends, I mean content creators. I can't show this video to anyone until, it came out. So enjoy the OTA. It's out. Let me know what you think of it down below, and I'm sorry that I didn't share it with you in advance. If I do that, I'm pretty sure I'm breaking a contract. So appreciate everyone hanging out to the end. See you around. Have a good one. Have a great one. Until the next one. Peace out.